Lesson 97, the third missionary journey, part 3. So Acts chapter 21, if you remember last time, he stopped there in verses 36, 37, 38 at Miletus. He met the elders of Ephesus. They wept and waved goodbye to him. Okay? Verse 1 of chapter 21. And it came to pass that after we were gotten from them, and had launched, so they left in the ship, we came with a straight course unto Cos, and the day following unto Rhodes, and from thence to Patara, and finding a ship sailing over to Phoenicia, we went aboard and set forth. So they got off one ship, hopped on another. Now when we had discovered Cyprus, we left it on the left hand. So they're sailing south towards Egypt, and there's Cyprus on their left-hand side, and they know they need to now head east. And they do that. They go south of Cyprus and landed at Tyre, for there the ship was to unlade her burden. So the port city of Tyre. And finding disciples, so believers, we tarried there 7 days, who said to Paul through the Spirit that he should not go up to Jerusalem. So how long is he in Tyre here, Joe? Make sure you're following along, please. Micah. 1 week, also known as 7 days. Okay? So he's there, and he's preaching and teaching. And when we had accomplished those days, we departed and went our way, and they all brought us on our way with wives and children till we were out of the city, and we kneeled down on the shore and prayed. And when we had taken leave of one another, we took ship, and they returned home again. And when we had finished our course from Tyre, we came to Ptolemais, and saluted the brethren, and abode with them 1 day. And the next day, we that were of Paul's company departed, and came unto Caesarea, and we entered into the house of Philip the evangelist, which was one of the 7, and abode with him. So again, in verse 5, he says goodbye. And these people, and he in his preaching probably has insinuated to them, this is the last time I'm going to be coming through here and preaching and teaching to you. I'm going to Jerusalem. I know the Lord has a plan for me there. Okay? And so they too kneel down with him on the shore. They weep. And he goes from there to Ptolemais. And then he comes to Caesarea. And they stay at whose house here? Do they go to, Jennifer? Go to Philip the evangelist. This is the same Philip who we had seen before, had done things. He met the Ethiopian eunuch and so on. And we learned some more things about him. 9, and the same man had 4 daughters, virgins, which did prophesy. And as we tarried there many days, there came down from Judea a certain prophet named Agabus. Remember, we had him before too, giving prophecies. But here we see Philip has 4 daughters, so this must have been Caesarea where he settled down and finished out his ministry, preaching and teaching, and now has established a family. But now this Agabus comes. What is he going to tell? Well, he gives a lot of, even more, we know Paul's been hinting that I'm going to be bound in Jerusalem and that this is my last time seeing you. Now Agabus shows what God has revealed to Agabus here in verse 11. And when he was come unto us, he took Paul's girdle, so like a belt or sash around his waist, and bound his own hands and feet. So Agabus ties up not Paul, but Agabus takes Paul's sash or his belt and ties it around Agabus' hands and his feet. Okay? Ties him own self up. And thus saith the Holy Ghost, so shall the Jews at Jerusalem bind the man that owneth this girdle, and shall deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles. Well, who owns the girdle here, Logan? Paul does. He will be bound in Jerusalem the same way. And when we heard these things, so the we here is obviously the writers of Acts, Luke, and the others that are with him. And when we heard these things, both we and they of that place besought him not to go up to Jerusalem. Who didn't they want to go to Jerusalem? Hannah? Who did they not want to go to Jerusalem? These people. Who were they worried about? Paul. They're afraid for Paul. If he goes to Jerusalem, something might happen. Okay? Verse 13, then Paul answered, what mean ye to weep and to break mine heart? For I am ready not to be bound only, but also to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus. And when he would not be persuaded, we ceased, saying, the will of the Lord be done. And after those days we took up our carriages and went up to Jerusalem. So they tried to keep him from going Just like Jesus' disciples that once told him, don't you go to Jerusalem because you too will be bound there. Jesus had to go. Paul knows it's the will of God. Whatever happens to me will happen there. I cannot fight it. Don't break my heart and tell me not to go because you love me. I must go. I cannot disobey the word of God. So they took their carriages and went to Jerusalem. Verse 16. There went up with us also certain of the disciples of Caesarea, and brought with them one Mason of Cyprus, an old disciple with whom we should lodge. And when we were come to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. The brethren being fellow Christians, other disciples there. And the day following, Paul went in with us unto James, and all the elders were present. And when he had saluted them, he declared particularly what things God had wrought among the Gentiles by his ministry. So he tells all the stories of things that had happened on his journey. And when they heard it, they glorified the Lord and said unto him, Thou seest, brother, how many thousands of Jews there are which believe, and they are all zealous of the law. And they are informed of thee, that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither to walk after the customs. What is it therefore? The multitude must needs come together, for they will hear that thou art come. So they're telling him, look, we hear that you're teaching the Jews, forget the old law of Moses and the Gentiles. We don't need to be circumcised anymore. But others are still going in those customs. We need to bring them together. What shall we do? Verse 23, Do therefore this that we say to thee. We have 4 men which have a vow on them. Take them and purify thyself with them, and be at charges with them, that they may shave their heads, and all may know that those things whereof they were informed concerning thee are nothing, but that thou keep thyself also walkest orderly, and keepest the law. So they're putting Paul in a position here. They're saying, take sides. We got to be careful about that too. Sometimes we might have a bone to pick with someone. So we might go to the minister. Now, what do you think about this? And then he's, well, I want you to be on my side. Let's go talk to that person now. It's not how we should behave. But that's what they're trying to get Paul to do here. As touching the Gentiles which believe, we have written and concluded that they observe no such thing, save only that they keep themselves from things offered to idols, and from blood, and from strangled, and from fornication. So these Jews here say, hey, look, they aren't doing any of those things, these Gentiles. The only thing they do is those things that were written in that letter. Well, of course, that's all they need to do. They don't need to follow the old laws anymore. So let's see what Paul here does. Then Paul took the men, and next day, purifying himself with them, entered into the temple to signify the accomplishment of the days of purification, until that an offering should be offered for every one of them. And when the 7 days were ended, the Jews which were of Asia, when they saw him in the temple, stirred up the people and laid hands on him, crying out, so they see what he had done going in there, crying out, Men of Israel, this is the man that teacheth all men everywhere against the people and the law and this place, and further brought Greeks also into the temple, and hath polluted this holy place. So what's their accusation? How has Paul polluted the temple, Kenton? Brought Greeks. These people are unclean. They're not Jews. They're not proselytes. These are Gentiles. They should not have been brought into the temple, for they had seen before with him in the city of Trophimus an Ephesian, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. Notice key word there is supposed. They didn't have evidence or know for sure. They just supposed. They assumed that's what he did. Makes us be careful that we don't make assumptions about other people. Walk in someone else's shoes before we make accusations, or find out your facts and information before you dare throw out an accusation. Verse 30, And all the city was moved, and the people ran together, and they took Paul and drew him out of the temple, and forthwith the doors were shut, because it needs to be cleansed, of course. And as they went about to kill him, tidings came unto the chief captain of the band, that all Jerusalem was in an uproar. So, again, a mob, just like in that other city. So here we have a mob. Okay? What are they doing? Well, they don't know. They saw another mob going down the street. Oh, we'll join with them. It looks pretty good. There they go in this mob here. So Paul is now taken by them. What's going to happen to him? He could be killed. He could be bound. Let's find out. Verse 33, Then the chief captain came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains, and demanded who he was and what he had done. So, in the situation, the chief here, the commander, realizes, there's an uproar, and it's about this man here, So rather than ask questions, he binds him up and puts him in chains, and then he'll find out what he needs to do. Okay? Again, if you're in a mischievous place, okay, and the police show up and something's going on, they don't know you. They don't know if you have weapons. So what do the police do for their own safety? They put you in handcuffs. And then they ask questions, and then they let you go. Okay? But police have to do that from time to time. In a situation when you have a mob, you don't know who is what and who is who. And for their own safety and for the safety of the mob, they might just start grabbing people. And they say, sit over here in this pair of handcuffs. They go get more handcuffs, put them on other people, have them sit down. And now they can have a discussion and find out what's going on. Okay? But for other people's safety and your safety. So that's what this leader does here. He doesn't know what's going on. He just sees a mob and it's about Paul, that man. So he's going to bind him up and take him away. That way the mob will leave him alone and be quiet, and he can make sure an innocent man isn't killed. He doesn't know what's going on. So that's what the Romans do. They bind him up, and now they're going to try to figure out what's going on. And some cried one thing, so some accuse him of one thing, some another among the multitude. So no one's got their story straight. And when he could not know the certainty for the tumult, so this leader, this captain, he can't figure out exactly what is going on. He just says, he commands, take him to the castle. I'll figure this out. Get him out of here. Take him to the castle. They must have been near some castle, which probably had a prison in it. And when he came upon the stairs, so it was that he was borne of the soldiers for the violence of the people. For the multitude of the people followed after him, crying, away with him. So they're going up some stairway. Was it the stairway on the outside of a castle or one? But it must have been some type of stairway that the mob could still see him as he's going up the stairs. He's being brought up. And then Paul rightly and smartly does this. Verse 37, and as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, may I speak unto thee? So he says that to him. But what language does Paul use to speak to this centurion? Not the Hebrew tongue. Garrett, right, who said, canst thou speak Greek? So the centurion or the leader here goes, you can speak Greek? And that makes all of a sudden the awareness go up, because he's like, well, this man maybe is an important man. Maybe I should find out what's going on. Are not thou that Egyptian which before these days madest an uproar and leddest out into the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers? So there must have been another man in town that a few days ago or the day before who also was creating a mob-like situation and needed to be dealt with. But that's who maybe this leader thought Paul was. Oh, you were that Egyptian. But when he speaks to him in Greek, he goes, oh, you're not that guy? But Paul said, I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city. And I beseech thee, suffer me to speak unto the people. And when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs and beckoned with the hand unto the people. And when there was made a great silence, he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue, saying, so Paul says to the man, here's who I am, here's what I am, and I would like to, before you continue taking me on, here's the crowd down here, this might be my last opportunity to speak to them. I would like to speak to these people before you finish taking me away. And now this man, realizing that Paul is a respectable man, gives him license, it says there, and says to Paul, you may speak to them. So Paul turns on the stairs. Now it's as though he's up high on a pulpit so that he can preach to the mob down there. And he preaches chapter 22. My brethren and fathers, hear ye my defense, which I make now unto you. And when they heard that he spake in the Hebrew tongue to them, they kept more silence. And he saith, so now he's speaking in a different language, the Hebrew, which all the Jews speak. I am verily a man which am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, that wise old teacher that he was taught by, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous toward God as ye are to this day. So I was brought up the same way you were. I was taught to follow all of Moses' laws just like you were. I was instructed, and I kept them just as I should, just like you do today. Okay? And I persecuted this way unto the death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women. So he says, I killed people. I killed them if they didn't follow the laws. Okay? And he goes on and he tells about his being converted in those verses. There's verse 7, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And we have the story of him arising, going into Damascus in verse 12. Ananias, verse 13, brother Saul, receive thy sight. Okay? And then we see that also he goes to Jerusalem, but God comes to him in a trance, saying, make haste and get thee quickly out of Jerusalem. So he goes there. Verse 21, depart, I will go to the Gentiles. He talks in verse 20, he was there by Stephen when Stephen was killed. And then he talks about some of his being moved around and everything else that's going on at this time. He doesn't get into the deepness of his missionary journeys, but he teaches them of who he is. Okay? And that's kind of where we're gonna stop, because at the end of chapter 22 here, and he says, where is it? Oh, verse 22. And they gave him audience unto this word, and then lifted up their voice and said, away with such a fellow from the earth, for it is not fit that he should live. Well, what was it that upset them? You have to look at the verse before. What did Paul say that upset them, that made them cry out and tell him, away with him? What in verse 21 gets them so upset? What does he say there? What upsets? Faith? Yep, I can preach it to the Gentiles because God told me so. And immediately that's when they get upset. Verse 23, and as they cried out and cast off their clothes and threw dust into the air, and the chief commanded him to be brought into the castle and bade that he should be examined by scourging. So whip him to find out what is the truth that he is saying, that he might know wherefore they cried so against him. And that's where we'll stop, and we'll see what happens with this leader, this chief captain, because he has ordered Paul to continue to be brought. Obviously, he thinks now maybe Paul is a little bit of a troublemaker because the sermon was going good, and they're all listening until Paul said that. So this man thinks, well, this man knows exactly how to whip these people up in a riot. It's all his fault. So I am going to take him into the castle, and let's whip him and beat him, and that will get the truth out of him, what's really going on here. But that will get, we know, that man in trouble, just as it got other leaders in trouble for whipping a Roman before too. So we'll pick that up. We'll actually have a test here after the third missionary journey, and then our final group of lessons will be about what happens the rest of the way in Jerusalem, and then what happens to Paul finally on his final and last journey to Rome and the end of his life, and then a little bit of Revelation.